Hello, everyone. Sorry, there seemed to have been a weird glitch or something that happened last night, and the chat I was in didn't record, and I don't think anybody could get to. So I'm going to re-record it right now. So that being said, sorry, this is awkward for having it Thursday at 1:30, but I'm going to record this, and you'll have it to check out, and I'm going to post it up for you to review as soon as you can. So that being said, this week we're moving into the actual history, chunk by chunk, of animation, like we spoke about last week in our lecture. So now we're going to focus on the earliest part of animation, and that's when people decided, hey, how can we recreate movement or tell stories that make it seem like something's moving? Your homework for this week is to put up your project idea that you want to write your paper on and present at the end. The project guidelines have been updated. I apologize. It seems that some reason the list of things to choose from weren't there. So I know some people had posted a little ahead of time. And if you did do that and you want to change it for any reason, please feel free to. Also, you have screenings this week. So now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the course, and how it's going to work is every week you'll have screenings, and our lectures will touch on them, but I can't show all the screenings during the lecture. So sometimes I'll probably show some of the more important ones or call them out, but your homework each week is to watch those screenings and be ready to discuss them, either in the discussion boards, in the lectures, or as part of your assignment. So that being said, they all very much tie in this week to our lecture and our discussion boards. You have 3 discussion questions this week. The first one was already due on Wednesday, so if you haven't gotten that done, please make sure you jump over in there to the discussion board and get that done. And lastly, there are the last 2 discussion boards for the week, so make sure that you are on top of that and you're doing those. By the end of the week, your proposal for what you want to write your paper on is due, and if you have any questions on anything at any time during the course of this week or the course, like I mentioned last week, please do not hesitate to reach out to me either in the discussion board or via email, and I'll be glad to help. So it's hard to imagine a world where we haven't seen something animated or moving that's not, I'll put it this way, reproduced movement other than what you've seen with your real eye. I can't imagine it, just as like my kids can't imagine a life without the internet, right? Even though I lived it and I can tell them about it, to them it's obtuse. For us as a modern human, it's hard to believe that we've ever lived in a world where there was no animation. And this slide got crunched when it got put into Big Blue Button, but when you download the slides, I'm going to post them to be able to be downloaded into the thread or into the homepage. You should be able to see them normal. This is the only one that really gets tweaked up. So it's a creation of images. They can be drawn, painted, produced by basically any method that change over time to portray the illusion of motion. That's what animation is. It's just an illusion. It's an illusion of still images moving at a certain sequence in order to trick your eye into thinking it sees something moving. In film, they call it frame rate, right? So 30 frames per second for TV, 24 frames per second for film. That means that literally all that's happening is the camera is taking one still image or one frame, and so 24 of those frames equal 1 second of time in film. 20 or 29.97 or 30 frames per second equals 1 second of time. So when you see something animated over, let's say, 30 seconds, imagine 30 times 30, that's 9,000 frames. It's quite a bit of drawing. It's fun. So that being said, animation, that's kind of how it, or should I say, did I say 9,000? I think I meant 900. Anyway, sorry. It's a series of images drawn, painted, computer generated photography at times, anything just to portray that illusion of movement. So it started in the Paleolithic period. So in France, they found these cave paintings, and the paintings would have multiple sets of legs superimposed over it in multiple different positions. So if you can imagine the leg, here we see it. It's drawn here and here to give the illusion of moving. The leg's drawn here and here to give it illusion of moving. That's the origin. That's what they think is the origin of kind of where art and animation kind of came from, where these cave paintings. They are so old and so well preserved, but I mean, people had to look at it and be like, okay, I get what they're saying. The buffalo moves from here to here. How do I see that? Because the buffalo seems to stretch, like there's two of them. So the head and the head, the leg and the leg. That's where the initial stages of animation like this came from. So then we moved into the magic lantern. So if we think about them, it's hard to find images of these that are good because there were no photographs at the time. But what happened is they would take a oil painting and they'd make it translucent. And then they'd take a lens and a candle or an oil lamp, and they would shine the light behind the painting, and it would beam onto the glass or the lens, and that was it. It's super, super simple, and it's the earliest form of projected animation. If you think about maybe if you held up, it's like you drew something on a piece of saran wrap or clear plastic, like acetate, and then shined a light through it and it beamed onto a wall. That's basically what you would be doing. Or film negative, if you will. So when we get down into it, the originators of animation are almost all toys. So how this started and how the field of animation started really came from the idea of people were using these toys that were tricking them into seeing things in motion. The thaumatrope is the first one. So it was invented in the 1820s. Its name means the magic turn, and it was really just meant to keep kids busy. So like a lot of things, parents were like, oh my gosh, this kid won't stop bothering me. Let's see what I can do to amuse them. So they would take two pieces of paper and a string, one image on the front, one image on the back, and when you pull the string or you spin it, it gives the illusion of the two images combining. So you twirl the strings quickly between your fingers, and the two pictures seem to combine based on the idea of persistence of vision, the ability of the eye to retain roughly 1/20th of a section after 1/20th of an object a second of time. So like, let's say you look at something and you close your eyes. You know how you can see it still for a minute or so? Or not, I don't mean a minute in reality, but it's literally 1/20th of a second. But that's what that is. That's the phenomenon of persistence of vision. So the eye's ability to retain an image for just that split second is why the thaumatrope works. The eye continues to see the one image for just that brief second as the other image spins into play. And it gives you the idea of one continuous image that's moving. It's really cool to figure out the science and physics behind it. So here's how it would look. Here's a cage, and here's a monkey. So on one side of the paper would be the cage, on the other would be the monkey. And then when you pull, it would twirl and spin, and you would see the monkey in the cage and out of the cage, like popping in and out. And they were almost always these circular shapes because they would twirl best. So for this, side A, side B, and it would come together like the pumpkin would pop into Jack's hand. Horse rider, the rider would appear on the horse to pop on and off, etc. So these seem so simple and archaic, right? But it's how it started. It's getting the basics of two-frame animation, basically. So the persistence of vision, as defined before, it enables you to view a long sequence of images as animation. It helps you view cartoons and optical illusions every day. It's what makes you think that TV shows move. It makes you love your favorite GIF. It is the thing that makes things seem like they are in motion. And it's really just that ability of your brain for that 1/20th of a second to hold on to what it just saw and kind of put that in lockdown. And then from there say, okay, what's next? And then the what's next fills in the next gap. Very rarely, unless we're having a stroke or some sort of brain issue, do we have moments where there's nothing in our mind. Like you can meditate and get to that state, maybe, but for the most part, we don't notice a stop from one activity to the other. And persistence of vision is a great way of kind of showcasing that ability in humans, but it also is a huge way that we've kind of learned to entertain ourselves and build these tricks and alternate realities and illusions, which basically is what animation is. You're gonna get so tired of hearing me say that. So, I mentioned this in the last lecture as well, but this zoetrope would be the next major huge push forward. So, the zoetrope was invented in the 1860s, and it was designed to actually animate, not just trick your eyes into seeing two images blend together, but what it would do is it would spin around, and it had these slits in it, and images were put on the inside of the cylinder, and when you looked inside to this, when you spin the cylinder to see the images, it would appear like they were actually moving. A lot of things like things running, people running, horses, circus acts, things like that were very popular to be in the zoetrope. But here's the catch. It was super expensive. It was seen as a toy, and it was not something that common folk could just grab and have and use. It was for the rich. So like with anything, as something is so for a certain part of the economic community, not a lot of people know about it either. Like it's kind of this like mythic thing. But a zoetrope has been around for a very long time. And it was one of the first ways to tell a story visually with movement. So here's some examples of, you have the umbrella, penguin, the monkey, the frog with the ball, and then they're in here and they're spinning. So what you would see is an umbrella turn into a penguin, turn into a ball, just kind of as it spun. And persistence of vision would work by showing just long enough to this, so this would seem to transform into this and then would transform into this. So in here, if you see this example, the runner, right? Persistence of vision would show this pose to this pose to this pose cleanly as they go through. In things like walk cycles, when we learn about that, that's why sometimes you have things that are retentive or motions that are retentive and reactive and proactive. It's because the persistence of vision is going to allow it to seem like the leg moves up and down if you have this momentary frame in the middle that allows it to move. So animation started getting developed because as time went on, paper became available, and people wanted to figure out how to make their own animated toys or animation type toys. So this brings us to pretty much what drives animation forward in a huge way after the 1900s, and that is the flip book. So a flip book are made by stacking up sheets of paper and then drawing images on them and having them alter just slightly as you click through and animate, as you flip through the book. So they're in sequential order. So a lot of animation is also often called sequential art. Comic books, animation, things like that. And it's because typically the only way you can understand them is if you follow the images in a sequential order. So in the case of a flip book, as the viewer quickly flips through the book, they'll see something move or it appears to have motion. So here's kind of an example. You see it. All these different stacks of paper. We're going to have a slightly different version of this Keith Haring drawing and then you flip through it. So it would kind of flip over, and the images would change. So these are all different examples of flip books. And as you think of flip books and zoetropes and things like that, I want you to think about the Muybridge experiments and the things he was doing and how that would tie into it. So flip books could be simple, really kind of, here's a star falling and then the boot moving. So you would have the next frame, the boot would be a little bit over here, star would be a little bit more over here. Next one, frame 3, boot a little more over here, star over here. Just little movements, so then when you flip it, it looks like it's moving. I haven't seen a flip book in forever. So in 1906, a guy named Stuart Blackton, he makes the first animated film. He draws faces on a board, and then he photographs them onto film, and then runs the film sequentially through a projector, and he called it Humorous Faces of Funny Faces. It's the first ever case of stop motion, and it is very much regarded as kind of the thing that's going to lead flip books into the future, make animation more accessible. So I want to show a couple things from our screenings. Let me bring those up for you. So if we think about, these are the technologies that are happening, right? Interesting, it will not let me share my screen. All right. Let me try to change permission in here real quick. Bear with me, everyone. Sorry. All right. And this is strange. It will not let me shift over and share the screen. Let me minimize this and see if that has anything to do with it. Nope. All right. I don't want to have to go. Let's see how else I can do this. Don't know if it's going to be possible. Anyway, in your screenings, what I want you to focus on, and when you look at it, are things like Renard's The Pioneer. He was making cartoons in the late 1800s, right at the same time this American would make Funny Faces. Are there, I mean, everyone's always going to claim they were first, right? But I think that it's possible that these two things could have been going on at the same time without them really knowing the other was up to what the other one was up to. So we have Muybridge, and we have Renault, and then we have Etnie. And these are just the most amazing people. They're artists, and they're pushing things forward. And they start to develop animated films. They're taking things like zoetropes and beaming them through projectors and starting to create movement. The Lumiere brothers are starting to kind of pull together the idea of shooting on film and having the iris of the camera open and close at a certain optical rate, and that's going to catch our 1 second of animated time, and it's the beginning of actual film and animation at the same time. So as we move forward out of this era, we're going to start seeing two things happen. We're going to see the rise of cell animation, and we're going to see stop motion animation kind of kick in. As we see that, it's really important to kind of recognize the impact that this technology is going to have moving forward. So from here on out, these were very rudimentary ways of creating things. We would set up a bunch of different drawings and then trick the eye into seeing those actual drawings, the physical drawings, the tangible drawings. And then that would make you feel like it would move. But when you watch a cartoon, you're not watching the actual cells, or you're not seeing the actual film, you're seeing it projected. And there's a lot about that projection or the presentation of an animation or film that really helps you suspend disbelief and brings you into another world. So that being said, moving forward, you're going to see now these same two principles: stop motion animation and frame-based animation or cell-based animation are going to be the two major ways things are done until computers kick in. So a lot of what we're going to be discussing as we move forward is going to be very much steeped in the idea of, okay, we were doing stop motion animation in the 1900s, between 1900 and 1910. How did that then change in the 1920s? How did that change in the 30s, 40s, 60s, so on? And how did it impact what's around it? Cell-based animation. What was going on in the world at this time? How did that get going in the early 1900s, 1910s, 1920s? The Disneys got involved, the science changed, technology got better, but it's the same basic principles all the way through basically until like the mid-70s, early 80s when computers started getting more involved. But computer animation is still the same trick, it's just a different way of getting there. It's still based on frames and the idea of a certain amount of frames equals motion and movement. So in reality, once we learned we could trick the eye into thinking something was moving, we were off and running. And it's going to keep changing. I think VR is the next kind of big thing, right? Where I don't know how it's going to be used, and I don't want to act like I can predict the future, but at some point, we're tricking ourselves into being in a whole other world. It's using a lot of that same kind of ideology and thought process that was going on when these initial stages first started. So I originally had planned to spend about 20 minutes going over some screenings with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this chat and get the archive up, and I'm going to record another one going over the screenings for you or with you a little bit later this afternoon when I can. All right, cool, and thank you guys. Have a wonderful day, and I appreciate your time.